Born in Santa Monica, California, and lives and works in New York City. He uses a variety of media, installation and performances to explore the visual mapping of subjective thoughts and emotions. Maps play a very big role in his work. There are all kinds of maps: mind maps, city maps, architectural maps, many maps. Since the late 70s, he has used hypnosis in his work, including performance under hypnosis, as he did at Tate Modern in January 2007. Performances can last several hours as the artist exhibits different behavior, pouring himself coffee, pacing the floor, grunting, crying, singing, uttering phrases and exclamations, as well as drawing or painting in black ink on large pieces of paper or bed sheets or a wall. Actually, this is a continuation of a dialogue. We had met with Matt at Art and Brain. That was a sort of a predecessor to the marathon. It was a search for another format for a conference already then, around 95. But then it wasn't a marathon, but it was kind of the opposite. It was always very big conferences which we organized, and then the conference got cancelled and only the coffee break got maintained. And everybody was there and just had a coffee break. And we had this event, Art and Brain, in Jülich with Matt and Carsten Höller and Rosemarie Tockel and many others. A very warm welcome to Matt Mullican.
Okay, my lectures generally have a very strict format, and this is unusual for me to break that format, so I'm trying to figure out how to do it. All my work basically really revolves around this issue of mapping and also delineating areas that are not necessarily physical. I'm going to start with this chart. This is a flag which I produced in '82, and there are 5 worlds depicted on the flag, the red on top and the green at the bottom, and you might say it looks a little bit like a game of sorts. Now I need someone to give me some keys. Does someone have some keys they can give me? And I'm going to demonstrate the 5 worlds which I work with. Okay, well this is, okay. So here we have this nice little bunch of keys, and the green down below is the elements, the elemental. That's the physical world, and so you can imagine that there's an atomic frying pan, and it's about maybe this large, and when you put anything in it, it immediately starts to really burn. It's super hot. So when I throw the keys into the frying pan, they immediately warp, and they're no longer real keys. They don't function anymore. They look like keys, but they're no longer keys. If you want to say something and it exists as it is used rather than what it looks like. So they stop being keys, and eventually within a couple of seconds, the softer metal melts. You can tell the difference. And then the harder metal starts to melt, and then pretty soon there's a puddle. And at one point, the keys disappear. Visually, they stop to exist. You just see some gook on the bottom of this pan. And then eventually they disappear totally. There's not a trace of material there. Okay, and that would be material without meaning, and that would be the bottom of the chart. The next is these keys as they exist in the real world, and that would have been these keys 20 minutes ago in your pocket. That would have been, that's the reality of that. The blue area is the world unframed. It's the automatic. It's when I'm not thinking. When I'm just getting up, making coffee, getting dressed, doing all the daily stuff, that would be in the blue area. And that's the world unframed, the pocket with the keys in it. Then we go to the yellow, which is in the middle, and that's the world framed, and that's when the thing shifts from the world of the unframed to the world of the framed. So these keys then become on display. So for instance, this key has a historical importance, so it's exhibited in a museum. Or the design of this key is particularly important, and so it's at the Museum of Modern Art, where you'd have an exhibition on keys. Or I could say that these were Elvis Presley's keys. And his keys, these were his personal keys, and that he would go through Graceland opening and closing doors, making sure everything was kind of crazy that way, everything had to be clean. And so these keys are now going to be put at auction. The keys no longer work. They've stopped working 30 years ago. There's not a lock that's the same, but as objects, they are very important, and they're going to be put at auction, and they're going to be approximately expecting to make around $50,000 on these keys. Okay, then you go to the black and white area, the black area, the black and white, that's the world, the language. And that is when the keys no longer have to, since they're no longer functioning keys, they become just simply visual. They become archetypal. They become language. So then the keys themselves are marginally important as physical objects. They now are represented in media. The keys are in the auction catalogs. There are posters for them. People want to see what the keys look on the internet. They, in a way, the black and white area is like the mapping area, where things cease to be physically experienced and they are becoming experienced on a level of language. And so that would be in the black area. And then you go to the top, which is red, and that's the subjective. And the reason that I don't have keys on me is because I hate keys. I hate the idea of opening and closing doors with a key. I really don't like whenever I have to reset my phone and I need to put a passcode in there, the PIN. I hate pins and I hate keys. I hate this whole issue. And my hatred is the red area. That's the subjective area. That's meaning without object, and that's at the top of the chart. So at the top of the chart is subject, and at the bottom of the chart is, or map, is material. So material without any meaning at the bottom, and meaning without any material on the very top. Now the thing that I did after I did this chart's from '82, and about that time that I did another chart not long after that, which was where I had the signs for, that's a head. And then you say a circle, square, triangle, and then you have the world framed in the middle, and then the world unframed below, and then the language here. And then you'd have avenues. And so you'd have avenues that lead from the top. In the middle, you see, is subjective. Now what happens down below is that you have parallel lines. There's no, this is, and then you have a mirror of the top in the center. And this is like a cityscape, which I did make into a virtual environment in 1991, where one could walk down these avenues, and I had all, it was done with a supercomputer out in LA. And this has been, I've done it in iron and in glass and all kinds of materials, but it really has to do with the orientation of the walls and then the roads to dissect those walls. So if we were to go into the subject, what I would go back, which is really not what I see, but what frames what I see. So when I was a child, when I was 6, 7 years old, I lived in Los Angeles, and I believed, I didn't go to church, but in thinking about where was I before I was born, I believed that I was on a conveyor belt. And I went down a chute that said Mullican on it. And that chute went down into my life. Okay, now also, so that answers the question, where was I before I was born? And you see, maps don't have to be about real things. I mean, when you think about any kind of cosmological system that is greater than, say, this room or any kind of architectural space, you're going to go straight into religion, you're going to go straight into all this other weird subject matter. This was done in 1970 72, 73. And it really was not a subject that was being done by a lot of people to deal with what was happening before I was born. Then there was Fate, and Fate looked at me on a TV. There I was, and he has a big lever, and he's pulling it, and on top of it is my birthday, 1951, and then 2035 was my death date. And it's creeping up on me. It used to be that I was, pretty okay with that date. Now it's getting a little bit tight. And so this answers the question, why do things happen the way they do? I mean, why did I break my leg? Well, it's fate. And so this answers the question, where was I before I was born? And why does this stuff happen to me? And that's the fate. And then at my death, okay, then there's the figure of death. And fate comes down and stands with death. And they are in a semicircular corridor. And they decide if I go up to heaven or if I go down to hell. And this is what happens after I die. So this map tells me where was I before I was born, why do things happen the way they do while I live my life, and what happens after I die. Now this, I was working, death in my body of work as an idea and as a person is quite everywhere, because my work to a large extent has to do with life. And a chart that I want to talk, the next chart is a chart of media, which is very much related to that one there, where I'll start off with a stick figure drawing, and he's framed. And there he is, okay? And I'll call him Glenn, okay? And then I'll put on this side a drawing from a cartoon. Like maybe it's the guy, John Glenn, the astronaut, and he is in a cartoon. And then over here, I have a photo of, say, Glenn Ford or John Glenn. So this is a photo, and this would be a drawing, and this is Glenn. And then a stick figure drawn just on the wall without a frame. And then a sign of a man. And then I'll even put that sign of the man in a chart like that one there, because this would be like the mapping reality. And then I have a head and a body, the most reduced representation of the human form that I could come up with, which is a simple head and a body. And then I have the head and the body in parts, like that, and then I have the part here, a part here, 2 parts here, and 2 parts here. Now, if you didn't have this, these would have no meaning whatsoever. But since you have this becomes the title of this becomes the title of that, and no language. This becomes the point that holds them together. So the overall context of what the map represents is the thing that binds it and defines it. And then beyond that, then you go to the circle, square, triangle. Okay, and then if you wanted to go further, we could go to movies. And then we can even go to the theater and so forth. But okay, so I have this list, and then I get a la voodoo. I get a hammer, but usually if I have the actual drawing, I can get a pin, and I can prick it like this. And then I can prick this one. So I prick the photograph, and then I can prick the drawing, and then I can prick the stick figure framed, and then the stick figure unframed, and then I can prick the symbol, the sign like in the bathroom, and then the head and body, and then the head, and then the circle, square, triangle. Who feels the most pain? And when I laid everything down on the floor, where is the empathy? Where am I going to put my psyche? And generally speaking, the psyche, at least when I was asking people, it was in somewhere in this area, because this is overly remote and this is overly kind of abstract. This is like you're guarded from the media, and here it goes the other direction. So this chart, and the medium continues to dance and theater, and it goes into writing, and all my exhibitions were in galleries followed, and this was in the 70s into the 80s, followed this pattern. So the whole gallery became a big map, a chart of media and how we projected into it. Now what happens if you wanted to say, when I'm saying that stick figure is living a life, I wanted to prove that stick figures live lives. I wanted to go into the picture and say, what does the air feel like? What is he feeling inside that place? How do I get into that place? Which is a completely different experience than, say, reading a map, although they're all on the same level. When I'm talking with the hypnosis, when I had myself put into a trance state, it's very much related to Glenn. It almost looks like I'm becoming like a Glenn figure myself. And what happens is that it's splitting up. It's going from the together, it's going up to the subject, and then down to the object, when you have the stick figure breaking into its parts. And when you have it like this, the first time when I was put into a trance state, this was in 1977 on stage at the Kitchen Center in Soho. I talked to a doctor not that long ago, and I said that I was doing this, and she said very brightly, "Were you a passenger?" And I said, yes, because what's going on is that when you have a chart like this, it's both, of course, the plastic, and it's both the ink, and it's the person. And when you're put into a trance, you are you as you are, and you are the subject that you represent. Your psyche is split into two parts, and you both have recognition of the other. Recently, I went to Newcastle, and I did a project up there with an MRI machine. And what they did is they put me into a very good trance state. They have a very good hypnotist that they found for me. And then they proceeded to put me into the MRI machine to track my brain. And as they tracked it, and they found that when you're in a resting state, your brain is blue and red, you might say. That's how they map the brain. And so it has to do with different actions. And they were very surprised that when I was in the trance state, it wasn't blue or red, it was blank. It was, it had nothing there. I was like a blank sheet. And I tell you, whenever I put into a trance in front of an audience, like at the Tate, the first thing I do, and the only thing I do, is that I am touching the walls. I go for the walls, I go for the floor, I go for my face, I put my hands on my face, I'm rubbing my face, because that's the only thing I can think to do. I have no idea whatsoever. And it's that kind of, that experience of dealing with information on that level, and the fact that if I am two people, there is the icon reality of the character, and then there's the person that's in that combination. So the two coexist. I think that's it.